So let's start. We stop at background properties, background colors yesterday. So today we are just going to continue from there. So we're going to be looking at margin. We'll look at pattern. We can look at offset if time permits. Look at width and height if time permits. So let's go ahead and just generate our boilerplate. And here, let's change our title to 100 days. And let's connect our CSS to our HTML file. You already know how to do that. So let's connect our CSS file. Alright, style sheet, that's the name of our CSS file. And here, let's just create a div. And inside this div, let's just have test. So lorem, just to generate random text. Once you type lorem and you hit enter, it will just generate random text for you. Okay, so let's just open a preview so that we're able to see real time what we are doing, something like this. And maybe we can just add a header here and H1 or H2. And let's say okay. So we'll be looking at margin. Let me just let me have another div here. And lorem. Okay. So that's fine. So let's look at margin. What's margin? So margin are actually used to create spaces around our element, but outside the element. So we have margin and we have padding. So margin will just help us to create space outside the element that we are working on. So let's give this div a name and give it a class name. And let's give it 1. And let's give the second div a class name. And let's give it 2. Okay, so that we're able to style them. So margin will just help you to create space around the element you are working on, and then that space is going to be outside the element. Okay. So let's use div2. Let's style div2 and just element to div2 and see how it works. Let's add margin to div2 and then let's see how that works. So first we'll go to our style sheet, and here we'll just pick, remember it's a class, so we have to have 1. That's the period sign and 1. No, we are styling 2, sorry. So this has to be period and 2. Okay, so here let's add a border. So for you to see, we need to add a border, and let's just give it 2 pairs solid light blue. Okay, so that we're able to see the border. So now we have a border around our div. So let's give our div a margin. So we say margin, and let's give the margin 20 ps, something like this. So you see, what margin does is that margin will create space outside the element you are working on, outside the element. All right, please pay attention because these things can be confusing. right? You might, want to do something and you don't know how to use it. So margin will just create a space outside the element for you, outside the element you're working on. So if you use the margin property, that means you are saying, hey, I need a space outside my element, not inside the element, outside elements. Okay? That is one. The next thing I want you guys to know is that the margin property can be separated. So here, when we say margin 20 ps, we're actually saying that we're giving the margin top, the margin right, margin bottom, margin left 20 ps. And like I said yesterday, if you are assigning a value to your property, the first value you put, if we're going to divide this by 4, the first value you put normally is the top. So we're always going like this, from top to right, bottom, and left. If that is clear, if that makes sense to us. So we can also do something like, say, instead of saying margin 20 ps, we can say margin top. And then margin top, we say 20 ps. So that means we are only giving the top a margin. So we can also say margin bottom will not be visible, but we can say margin left, and then we'll give it maybe 5 ps. And then we see that we have 5 ps margin here. We can say margin right, and let's give it maybe 10 ps, and you see that we have 10 ps margin right. Like I say, margin bottom will not be visible because there's no content down here, so it will not be visible. So even if we say margin bottom and give it 20 ps, it's not visible because there's no content down here. But if we have content down here, then you see that there's margin of 20 ps down here. So we can, just give our content, our elements, different margin properties. So margin top, margin right, margin bottom, margin left. Or we can simply just say margin and we give a uniform margin to the content or the element on all sides, the 4 sides. Okay? So maybe we'll give it a background color. You already know how to do that, background color, and let's just give it something like this. Okay, so this is how you can add margin. Another thing we can also look at is the margin shorthand. Like we did yesterday, we also have what we call margin shorthand. But let's see, before the margin shorthand, let me just show us something. So I will take all this off. So I can have margin, and this margin I can say 20 ps, and then I will say space and say 10 ps. All right, now I want someone to tell me what we just did here. We gave margin 2 values. Now remember, the first time we gave margin just 1 value by saying 20 ps, and we have 20 ps run. Now we say margin 20 ps, margin 10 ps. What do you think we are trying to achieve here? Anyone? What do you think we are trying to achieve here? Anyone that knows? So we have 2 values for our margin, 20 ps and 10 ps. So what do you think we are trying to achieve? We did this yesterday when I was talking about border. So what do you think we are trying to achieve? Let me see if there's anyone that's want to try. Anyone? Okay, so let me explain. So here we are saying that at the top and bottom, give us 20 ps space, 20 ps space, top and bottom. And at the right and left, give us 10 ps space. So that is why you see this space and this space is uniform. So this space and this space is 10 ps, and this space and this space is 20 ps. So just like I said yesterday, the first value is always for the top and bottom. The second value is always for the right and left. So if we add a third value here, and let's say 5 ps, What are we trying to achieve? We're trying to give the bottom a value. So if I say 5 PS here again, what have we done? We have decided to say, okay, you know what? We are giving the top 20 PS, we are giving the right 10 PS, we are giving the bottom 5 PS, and then we are giving left 5 PS. So our values will always go from top to right to bottom to left. Top, right, bottom, left. But if you're having just two values, note that the first value is always for top and bottom. The second value is for right and left. Top and bottom, right and left. Please, these things are important because sometimes you might just have little issues with, trying to align items, trying to, get items to where you want them to be on your web page. This is one major issue people get. So getting this right, from the get-go is really going to help you. It's really going to help you. All right. So another thing I want us to know is that we can also have other values for our margin. We can also have other margin values that we can work with. Values like author, values like length, percentage, inherit, we can have those values. So if we have author value basically is calculated by the browser. So for our margin, if we say our margin here is author, what we are saying is that the browser should calculate the margin we have. The browser should calculate the margin for us. But we can also give it a percentage and say, okay, we want our margin to be maybe 5%. Something like that, 5%. So it takes 5% from the left and right, 5% that's of the web page, and then 5% of where you have your last content and where the next content is going to be, the vertical axis. It takes just 5%, 5%, 5%. Okay? And then you can also say, oh, I want my margin value to be inherit. Okay, so you just inherit the page margin. So I don't use inherit. I can use percentage depending on what I'm looking for. I can use author. I don't use inherit. And then the one I love to use is to specify my margin properties. And so, okay, I need 20 PS bottom. I need 10 PS top, something like that. So we can use any of this, either auto, inherit, depending on what you are doing, and if you are comfortable with it, you can use any of these values. Okay? I think that is about it for margin. Yep, that's about it for margin. The next thing we'll look at will be padding. So I will just change this to padding. Padding. Okay. So padding in CSS is used to create spaces around an element content, but this one is inside the content. So it's inside the defined content that you're looking at. Remember, I said margin is outside, so padding is inside the content. So if we are looking for space where we have this border, we don't want this border to be very close, or we don't want the text to be very close to the border, then we can use our padding property. So padding, and we can just say 5 PS. All right. So 5 PS padding, this time around, we are looking at the content inside. So it gives space between the border and the text. So let me increase our padding and say 20 PS. Maybe that will be bold enough. So here you can see we have our padding 20 px, so it's giving us space inside. So can we use both padding and margin? Yes, so we can also give it a margin property here and say margin, we want a bit of margin between you and this guy. So we'll give it 5 ps, or let's increase that to maybe 10 ps. And so we have our margin, we have our padding. But let's play around with this thing. We are learning. Let's say all we need is just a space between this guy and this guy. So we can say padding top, rather than just giving it padding, and we don't want it to be padded here. So we can just say padding top and give it maybe 5 ps, just to have that little breadth, right? That little space to make our work look beautiful. So this is actually when you are doing proper website work. You don't want your space to be too big, or you are not looking for space here and here. So all you need to do is just to take your padding top. Okay. Sorry, margin top. Just like we have for margin, we also can have padding top alone, and we'll say, okay, we just want our padding to be at the top, and then we'll give it 20 ps. So we'll have just padding top. And we can also, okay, let's just have a padding bottom. So we can have a padding bottom, and then we'll also give it a particular value. So let's give this 15 ps, somewhat like that. It's okay. Let's have padding padding right. And we can have a padding right, and then we can also give it, let's give it 10 ps, something like that. And then padding left, and let's give our padding left 10 ps. Right. So here we can separate our padding also and say, okay, we just want padding top, or want padding bottom, or padding left, and then we can just play around with it. Now, just like we have for margin, let me take this off. Okay. Yep, let me just take that off now. Just like we have for margin, we can also have padding and say auto. We just give it auto. We are not specifying anything, so auto padding. So it's then this will be defined by the container, right? The container it's in will define the padding value. Or we can say we want it by percentage, so we can give it maybe 2%. Okay, 2%. We can say, oh, we want it by inherit, then we can also give it inherit. So you can play around with it, but what I prefer is giving it my value. I can just say padding, and I say 20 ps space 10 ps. All right, like this. So just like we explained when we're doing the margin, this is the same thing. So we're saying 20 ps for top and bottom, 10 ps for left and right, or right and left. Right and left is the correct one. 20 ps for top and bottom, 10 ps for right and left padding. So we can just play around with padding properties. I want to ask, is it clear up to this point? Am I too fast? Is there a question? Any question? Is it clear? If it's clear, if you get it to this point, you can just put 777. Let me be sure. If you have a question, then you can go ahead and ask a question. All right, let's continue. So now we're going to move to width, but let me just show us something. So with our also define width for our property. We can also define the width and say, okay, we want this width to be so percentage. So we can say maybe 300 ps. We don't want it to be more than 300 ps, so it gives us this width of 300 ps. We can say, okay, we want it to be maybe 400 ps. So it gives us 400 ps width. You can also say we want it to be by percentage, and then we can give it maybe 50%. So it takes 50%. All right, something like that. Now, when we use our padding property. When we use a padding property, there's something we call border sizing. There's something we call border sizing. Now, guys, just pay attention. If we have a padding and say, okay, let me do something with the first div. So .1, and here let's give this same width size of 50%, and let's give it a border. So 2 PS, solid light blue. Okay. Now, guys, pay attention. The difference between, let me just add everything here, the background also, so that I want us to get something. So background. So this, you're going to see this when you start working with Flexbox. So background color, let's give it the same background color. Okay. What else have we not added? Margin top. So let's give it margin top. Of how many PS? 5 PS. Okay. So we've given this guy, this div, everything as we have here, except for the padding. Except for the padding. Now, if you look at this div and this div, there's a difference. And the difference is that this div, if you look at the length, it's longer than this. If you look at the height or the width, in this case, the width, you see that it's longer. If you look at this, it's taller. You see the size. That's because we added padding to it. So padding, we just, add extra. The extra you add for your padding, it will add it to the size of your container. So if let's use pieces, yeah, and let's say 400 PS, yeah, and let's also add under the width, let's add 400 PS, yeah, 400 PS, yeah. Now, if we want our border, because sometimes you want to just have a border and you still want this container to maintain its size, what we will do in order that we allow this container to maintain its size is to do what we call border box or box sizing. And our box sizing, we're going to set it to border box. Now, once you set our box sizing to border box, it will reduce the width of our container. So we are saying we are going to border you into a box to where you're supposed to be, even if we add padding. So take off the padding inside the container, but let the container be boxed. So our container will remain the same size. You will need this. It's important. You will need this. So just have it at the back of your mind that if you don't want your container to be beyond the width that you want it to be, you need to, as much as you're going to add padding, you need to, wrap it using border sizing or box sizing, and then your box sizing is going to be border box. I hope this is clear. I'm just trying to explain this thing as simple as I can. I hope it's clear, though. I hope it's clear. If you don't get it, please go through the video again. I'm sure you're going to get this. Go through the video again. I'm sure you're going to get this. But just of your mind that if you want your container to maintain the exact size you give to it, then you have to wrap it inside box sizing, and your box sizing value is going to be border box. Okay, Let's take off all this and let's look at height in CSS. Let's look at height and width. So we're just going to do it together. So let's use one. So the height property, already we know what the height property does, right? We know what it does. So it just gives us the height of our container. The height, it specifies the height of our container for us. So if we say height here, we can give it let's give it 40 ps. So that is the height we've assigned to it. We can give it 100 ps. That is the height we've assigned to it. But we are not going to see that very well. So let's add border to it so that you can see the container. So let's just add 2 ps and 2 ps dashed. I just want to play around with this dash red, something like that. Okay, so that you guys don't think it's only solid, but of course that's all you'll be using most, solid. Okay, so you see it just specified the height of our container, but we can also set the height rather than giving it a value of 100 ps of ps. We can set the height to auto, just like we have. We can also set the height to percentage. We can give it a percentage. We can just set the height to the same values you have for margin and padding. You can use the same values for your height. The same values you can use for your height. Okay. So we can specify heights, and I can also, so let's give this 100 ps again. Let's give it a width first. So you can specify width and height, and let's say this width is going to be fit to content, and height is going to be fit to content too. So what this means is that this height and width will only increase if we increase the content inside this container. So right now it fits to the way it is, no space. But if we increase, of course, if we add padding, the padding is going to show. So let's just add a bit of padding here, and let's give it 5 ps like that. Okay. But if we then add something to div1, if we add something to div1, you see that it increases the height, and then the width can also increase depending on what you add. So when you say fit to content, it's just going to take the width and the height of the content that the container presently has. So once you increase your content, the height will increase. Once you increase your content, the width will also increase. So that is how you can work with your height, and you can also work with your width. All right, so we can also look at mass width, where you can set the maximum width of your container. All right, so we can set the maximum width and say, okay, we want this to have a maximum width, mass width, and then we can give it maybe let's say 200 ps. So that's the mass width. So we say the mass width is 200 ps. So it cannot go beyond 200 ps, no matter the content you put inside. And automatically, you see, it also increases the height because it's forcing the content to compress to height, because we don't want it to go beyond this particular. So even if you have your width, and then you then specify that the maximum width should be a particular. So you're saying that no matter what happens, don't go beyond 200 ps. So if we say 50% maximum width, 50%, we are saying that no matter what happens, Don't go beyond 50%, stay at 50%. So that's how you can, you can play around with your width, and you can play around with your height also. Width and height. All right, I'm sure this is getting interesting. It's getting interesting, yeah? So we are progressing. We are progressing. I'm sure that we are getting these things, but if you don't, please go back and watch the video. The next one we'll be looking at is box model. Just look at the general box model in CSS, and we'll use my pen for this. Look at the general box model in CSS. So box model in CSS is used when you're talking about the design of the layout of your container. Okay? So let's have a shape like this. Let's take this to red. We have a shape like this. And let me pick another color. We have another shape like this. This shape, we have another shape like this. Okay, it's actually too big, but let's just continue. So we have another shape, so like this. Okay, I'm sure we'll have 15 minutes left. Now, this space here, this space outside here is what we call the margin. This space here is what we call the margin. How the CSS box model works is what we call the margin. Here is a content. Is a content. Okay. Here is a padding. Padding, and then here is the border. So this is the border, just like we have the border line, in our HTML now. So this is the border. Let me see. Maybe I can just. Okay, not responding. I don't know why. I wanted to type it, but it's not responding. So here is our border. Our margin. This is the border we have. So we've given it a border. We've given this a border and say, okay, give us a border of 10 ps from the content. So here, sorry, I say border, padding. Here is the padding. Here is the content. This is the border, and what we have here is the margin. So this is how the box model of CSS work. Okay, I'm not having it for you again. So that is how the box model works. So you can use this to understand how your content is displayed in your web page. So this here is the border, the red here is the border, and then the padding is this space here of 5 ps. Let's increase our padding to 20 ps. 20 ps, okay. 20 ps. So this is our border. The space between there and here is our margin, which is this. So if I have to style, I think that's H1, I guess, or H2. Yeah, it's H2. Let's give it border 2 ps dashed red, something like that. Okay. So the space between this guy and this guy is what we call the margin. The space between the content and the border is what we call the padding. And this is the content, and this is the border. So that is simply how the box model is like in CSS. And by knowing this box model, it will help you to style and place your content properly in your web page. So you already know that, okay, if I'm looking for space around my content, outside the content, I have to use margin. If I'm looking for space inside the content, I will use padding. And if I want to see what my content looks like, trying to view the space and all that between my content and the next content or the content inside, I will use the border. So basically, you need to know this so that you are able to work effectively with your container. Okay, so we've been doing a lot of styling our test in our test, but let's just try and go through it again. So let's look at styling, test styling in CSS. So the first styling which we've been doing is color. It's color styling. So we can style. So let's use one again and just say color, and we'll give it red, something like that. So that is one way to style your color, your text. Another way to style your text can just be maybe the fonts, the text alignment, or the text decoration, or the text size and all that. So let's look at text alignment. So we can say, okay, we want our text to be, let's give this a border first so that we can see it properly. So border 2 PS, solid red. Okay. So we can say, okay, we want to align our text. So we just say text align. We can say center, and it align our text to the center. We are not seeing it very well because everything is close to the border. So if we give it a padding, let's give it a padding of 20 PS. So you can see that our text is aligned to the center of the container. So we can also say text align, or can say left, text align left. So it's all aligned to the left. We can say text align, and we'll say maybe right, sorry. And then it's aligned to the right. So you can just play around with your text alignment. We can play around with our text alignment. The next thing I want to show us would be text decoration. And then there's also something we call justify. So you can also use justify, just to justify your text, between your content. So justify. Yes, so just justify between the content. It doesn't want one side to be cheated. That's what justify does. Okay, so we can also look at text decoration. So we'll look at text color, text alignment. So we can also look at text decoration. Let me take this to the center first. Text center. We can look at text decoration. So text decoration, it's actually, I think we did this when we're trying to work with our list style during a nav, when we're trying to look at nav bar, the list style. But we can look at this now, and then text decoration, and we can say we want line, or text decoration. Let's use something that it's very noticeable. So we can say text decoration. Let's say text decoration line, and let's give it overline. Let's give it overline, something like this. So you have overline right in your text. You can also give it line through. line through, and then you have line through your text. You can give it underline. You can give it underline, and then you have underlines in your text. So that is it for text decoration line. So you can just look at your text decoration, and then you have a lot of decoration to give it text decoration. You can give it bullets, text decoration. You can stroke it just like we did, a lot of decoration. The next thing we will look at will be spacing, text spacing. How do you space your text? How do you space your text? So we can give it text spacing, and then let's say indent, text indent, and then we can give it a size, let's say 30 ps, something like that, but it's too small, so let's say 50 ps so that it's visible. Yeah, so text indent 50 ps. We can say letter spacing, so basically we are just spacing the letter spacing, and you can give it size, so let's say maybe 5 ps. That would be very wide, something like that, 5 ps. So depending on what you are trying to work on, you can. So this text styling, they are actually a lot. That's why I'm rushing them. They're a lot, but you can take your time and go through it. Maybe look through an online document. I don't like recommending document because what I like might not be what you like. But you can look through it and see different types of text decoration that you might enjoy using. Different types that you might enjoy using. There are a lot of them. So you can have your line height, right, where you specify the height of this text line and the next text line. You can have bullet, like I said before. You can have word spacing. So this is letter spacing. You can also have word spacing. Or we can say, okay, each word separate yourself by 5 ps, something like that. So there's a space, 5 ps space between this lorem and imsu, and so on. You can give it line spacing and white space, a lot of them. Okay, but yeah, like I said, this is just an introduction to it. You can go through it. And one thing I also need to put out here is that you don't need to do too much while you are working with your test. Just give it a basic, because already the test comes with a very good. So if I take out this, you see that it comes with a very good alignment, except in cases where you just need something special. That's when you can work around your test, or maybe you want to change maybe the fonts, maybe the size of the fonts, and you want it to give you something different, 50 ps, or maybe font family. You are looking for a particular font style for this particular container, so you can just play around. If not, there's really no need of you changing a whole lot about your test, when you have a lot of work to do as a developer. So test is not part of your problem, but because we are learning, we just have to note all these things and push them out there. Okay, let's change our text color from red. It's looking somehow. Let's take off our text color. We are done with that. Okay, so the next thing we will look at before we call it a day will be 3 minutes. Oh, 3 minutes. Okay, let's just use 1 minute to do this. Will be test shadow. So test shadow is just to give a shadow to your test. So we can say test shadow 2 ps. It's not visible because this is black. It's black, so it's not visible. So let's change this to, let's change the color to maybe blue. And maybe let's increase the shadow to 5 ps. 5 ps, 5 ps, something like that. So 5 ps left and right, sorry, bottom and top and bottom, 5 ps right and left. So let's see, 1 ps, 1 ps. Okay, so test shadow, this is how you can give your test shadow. I was just trying to use one value before, so I just remember you need to add your two values. So top and bottom is the first one, and then the second one is the right and left for your test shadow. So you can play around with your test shadow. You can also give it a test shadow color. So we can say this, we want it to be red. So our test shadow is red, or let's make it black. So our test shadow is black and the text is blue. All right. I think that is all about test shadow. We can maybe by next class we'll continue from test shadow. We'll also look at opacity, where you can add opacity to your test shadow. So rather than having it just black like this, we can also add opacity to it and say 0.4, someone like that, just to reduce the test shadow. But we'll continue from here in our next class because of time. All right, guys. I'm sure this is a lot of information, but please go back and watch this video, and I'm sure you're going to get it very well. So thank you for joining. This video is going to end very soon. Any question? If there's any question, please send it to my DM, and I will try to answer you this night. If you have a question this night, send it to my DM. Thank you, and do have yourself a pleasant night, guys.